Good morning to all of you. I will share our experience as a continuation of the first two presentations. I will share our experience from Bangladesh chapter. So, Bangladesh, as a party, Bangladesh has submitted its first NDC in 2015 for the period up to 2030. As a climate vulnerable country, Bangladesh adaptation remains the priority for Bangladesh in its NDC. Therefore, Bangladesh NDC has an adaptation portion that describes Bangladesh has already done on adaptation and what the priorities for the future. However, the loss and damage is not explicitly discussed in NDC of Bangladesh, but partly covered under the different component of adaptation. Under the NDC of Bangladesh, the primary goal for the adaptation is to protect the population, enhance their adaptive capacity and livelihood option, and to protect the overall development of the country in its strides for economic progress and well-being of the people. Soon, Bangladesh will develop adaptation and implementation National Adaptation Plan (NAP) to achieve the adaptation goals and to facilitate the integration of climate change adaptation action in national development process. According to the Bangladesh NDC Implementation Roadmap 2018, NAP will be the fundamental adaptation implementation policy which will implement the adaptation element of the NDC. Bangladesh identified 11 priority sector of focus in NDC of Bangladesh, as you can see in the slide, and also 11 priority sector and 14 broad adaptation action that are prioritized for the country. So these are actually the 11 sectors and 14 priority action plan that Bangladesh incorporated within the NDC. As I said before, loss and damage is not actually explicitly discussed in NDC of Bangladesh, but some of the sectors which is incorporated under the adaptation do cover the different aspect of loss and damage as well. As you can see in the slide, as a priority sector, Bangladesh incorporated disaster management, coastal zone management, flood control infrastructure, community-based conservation and capacity building. Besides that, we do have some other actions like improved early warning system for tropical cyclone, disaster preparedness, tropical cyclone and storm surge, inland monsoon flooding. So these are, though these are all listed under the adaptation, but these do cover quite a different aspect of loss and damage as well. For implementation of NDC and NAP together, and for the governance and coordination of NDC implementation as an institutional arrangement, it's established under NDC Implementation Roadmap 2018. However, the arrangement mainly aims to include and integrate NAP implementation side by side next to the NDC implementation under the one single framework. The institutional arrangement is constituted by 4 committees, as you can see in the diagram. It's NDC NAP Advisory Committee, which is the highest committee, and then under that there is NDC NAP Coordination Committee, and there is NDC NAP Implementation Analytical Support, and NDC Sectoral Working Group. Besides that, before adopting NDC, actually Bangladesh, as a progressive member of UNFCCC, Bangladesh adopted various laws and policies, strategic plan to address the adverse impact of climate change and adaptation measure are always in priority. The key policy intervention that will support the implementation of NDCs are listed in the slide, as you can see. In fact, if we go through all these documents, all these policy documents, actually from all these 11 policy documents, we took the adaptation sectors within our NDC. So it's basically the continuation of the all strategic action plans which is eventually focused in the adaptation part of NDC. For this study, as NDC, as I discussed, there is a 13 special sectors and also 11 priority actions. There are other cross-cutting laws and policies as well. So for this study, we explored like 65 sectoral policies and 35 laws that are relevant for the implementation of NDC. Besides that, we did have expert consultation with GD and national level knowledge dissemination to get an idea what is actually happening on the ground. So the key finding of this overall study from Bangladesh chapter is I'm not going to go sector by sector as we have 13 sectors and the findings is quite long. But the overall key finding is Bangladesh has relevant laws and policy to implement each adaptation sectors and prioritize action. However, effective implementation of policies and laws are yet to be ensured. So, though we submitted our NDC in 2015 and now it's 2019, but implementation is yet to be started. So that's the major finding that we found. Policies are also very wide and precise, and connotations sometimes hard to articulate. So all this, in most of these policies, there is a reflection of climate change, adaptation, or loss and damage. But it's from a very wider context. It's very hard to make a very precise, clear connotation and link up with the NDCs different sectors. Reference of climate change and adaptation action are directly reflected in few of the policies. However, it's very broad in a sense. And another key finding is that though in our NDC we had a clear statement like we are going to adopt our NAP very soon, but NAP is yet to be adopted. Unfortunately, we didn't start the process of NAP yet. Besides this, the other key findings from this study is there is another very big challenge related with the coordination among the various ministries and line agencies. As I said, NAP is yet to be implemented, and for NDC, we already, for the mitigation part of NDC, we already adopted an action plan in 2018. But there is no action plan or roadmap for the adaptation part of NDC. So that's a very big vacuum still lying there. And maybe if we adopt NAP, that might cover, but still there is a gap. The proper integration in the various policies of that related with climate change is also missing here. Finance and technical support, how it will be streamlined, how the finance will be allocated, is not very clear from the existing policies and action plan and strategic plans. Loss and damage is still very much in the conceptual stage that really need to be more translated within the ground. As I said, there is an institutional arrangement, but it is yet to be triggered. So we adopted the roadmap in 2018 December, but we didn't establish the institutional arrangement yet. So the institutional framework is within the policy, but it's not functional yet. It's not established yet. Besides that, there is a detailed guideline and mandates are missing within the policies and action plan that directly link up with the climate change, adaptation, and loss and damage. And as Nepal said, and I would also like to share the same experience, the lack of awareness. When we discuss with the different line ministries and department, they are not much aware about NDC, what is actually NDC, what is inside of the NDC. So enlightening the agency should be the first step before we actually implement the whole NDCs and its target. As a way forward, that what we actually feel like is for Bangladesh, if we really want to implement NDC, eventually we need to implement NDC, we need to adopt NAP as soon as possible, because as I say, how the adaptation part of NDC will be covered is not very clear. So maybe once we adopt the NAP, then it might be easy for us to articulate that how we are can implement adaptation part of NDC in the ground. There is also need of capacity building and effective coordination within the ministries. Transparency and monitoring is also a big issue, which is not very much clearly reflected in all other existing policies, especially the roadmap that we adopted in 2018. Assessment of resource and capacity needs is also missing there. Private sector engagement and overcome barriers to the investment is also a big vacuum that is existing now. And also, as the climate change and the other aspect is going very in a very wide arena, we also have a feeling like that it might be good for Bangladesh to have a separate secretariat which can only focus the climate change issues, especially from NDC and that perspective. So that's all overall finding from us. Thank you.
one is Sarama. In Bangladesh, priority sectors have been identified, and also one of priority actions is also identified. That is one. That's 11 priority sectors and also 14 priority actions. And the thing is that one governance or implementation arrangement is there for NDCs and maps. And also the proposed to have one secretariat coordinators. And similar as in Sri Lanka also, policy is there, but effective implementation mechanism, coordination mechanism is necessary to implement those policies. So having said that, may I invite next presentation from also Bangladesh. Is it a similar study or the separate study? Yeah, okay, that presentation will be made by Ms. Sabrin Sultana from the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change in Bangladesh. Floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I am sharing experiences about NDC implementation, the mitigation part in our country. As I know, Bangladesh is the 6th most vulnerable country due to climate change, according to the Climate Change Vulnerability Index of 2017 of German Watch. The economic losses due to climate change in Bangladesh over the past 40 years were 12 billion. It causes decreasing the GDP annually by 0.5 to 1%. To address this issue, the government of Bangladesh prepared the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan 2009. Among the developing countries, Bangladesh has for the first time initiated such type of strategy and action plan. BCC-ACP has 6 thematic areas, 5 focusing mainly on adaptation, while the 6 focused on mitigation and low carbon development. Although Bangladesh accounts for only 0.35% of global emissions, with this insignificant carbon dioxide emission, Bangladesh wants to play its part in the global collective action. In September 2016, Bangladesh ratified the Paris Agreement, and its nationally determined contribution was registered on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change NDC registry. Paris Agreement states that the least developed countries may prepare and communicate strategies, plans and actions for low greenhouse gas emissions development, reflecting their special circumstances. As a progressive member of the UNFCCC, Bangladesh was one of the first countries following the Paris Agreement to put in place a process for developing plans for NDC implementation. Bangladesh NDC has 2 components, adaptation and mitigation. As a climate change vulnerable country, adaptation remains the priority for Bangladesh. The adaptation part of NDC describes what Bangladesh has already done and what the priorities for the future. Another component is mitigation. In NDC, Bangladesh has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the power, industry and transport sectors by 5% below business as usual greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, using only domestic resources. As you see this, unconditional contribution, and by 15% below business as usual greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, if sufficient and appropriate support is received from developed countries under conditional contribution. For NDC implementation, this is the proposed governance arrangement. This arrangement proposed for the implementation of NDC with an aim to include and integrate national adaptation plan implementation side by side under single framework. This is the NDC NAP Advisory Committee. The advisory committee will be chaired by the Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and there have sectoral focal point ministries are Power Division, Ministry of Industry, Road Transport and Highway Division. Other relevant sectoral ministries or agencies such as Prime Minister's Office, Ministry of Railways, involved with this committee. As we know that Bangladesh has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the power, industry and transport sector. And as part of the NDC implementation roadmap, NDC sectoral action plans have also been produced for the power, industry and transport. The power sector is a vital component of Bangladesh's plans for economic development. As set out in the 2010 Power System Master Plan, the aim should be achieved. The 3 E's: economic growth, energy security and environmental protection. A key element of this is the expansion of renewable energy to meet carbon targets. There are a range of measures in the power sector to reduce carbon emission. There are switching of clean coal technologies, power generation from wind, biomass, etc. The transport sector in Bangladesh will contribute to greenhouse gas emissions reductions in a number of ways. These can be grouped according to the AVOD sheet improved framework. AVOD: reducing the demand and need for transport, such as minimize congestion, setting up Indian digital centers by city, etc. Encouraging people to switch to lower emitting modes of transport, such as railway, water, bus, etc. And increasing fuel and vehicle efficiency, such as construction of Dhaka Elevated Expressway, which is ongoing, BRT, hybrid cars and zero tailpipe emissions battery powered vehicles. In industry sector, there are some examples of specific mitigation measures, such as congestion with means cogeneration, which means simultaneous production of electricity and heat, which offer energy savings ranging between 15 to 40% compared against the supply of electricity and heat from power station and boilers. Implementation of E measures like leak sealings of steam and airflow systems can ensure a significant energy savings in the industrial facilities. The Bangladesh government is pursuing a low carbon development path with increasing emphasis on renewable energy and energy efficiency. There are some current mitigation activities. More than 1.5 million improved coke stove and nearly 4.5 million solar home systems have been distributed across the country. And under the solar rooftop program, around 14 megawatt of solar has been installed on the back-end rooftops of government and private buildings. As of now, 519.62 megawatt renewables are being implemented, having a share of nearly 3% in the overall energy generation mix. Additional 2000 megawatt solar power plant and 180 megawatt wind powers is ongoing. This is the estimated cost of key mitigation measures. Bangladesh is the least developed country whose emissions are less than 0.35% of global emissions. Bangladesh's approach is driven by the long-term goal announced by its Prime Minister that its per capita greenhouse gas emissions will not exceed the average for developing countries. We hope that we can successfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 5% below business as well by 2030. Thank you all for patience.